Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food systems storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food and beverage radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that Sam. It's gonna get you some in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy, episode 500.
500.
Woo! Happy 500th birthday, guys.
I can't even believe it, guys. This is crazy.
It is crazy. I mean,
it's
there's
just
only
fucking
52
crazy.
possible. Yeah, there's only 52 possible weeks in a year to clock 500, and it's the show has been on for a long time, 12 years, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, over 12 years now. Yeah, and wow, 500 episodes means about, I would say, 3,000 guests.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, think about it. I mean, like when I first started this back in 2010 or 2011, can't remember when it was, but yeah, I would have one guest on every week, and that didn't last for very long. Eventually, it became groups, duos. We got iced by Noah Rockbaum and Wondrich. So there's been, there was a long while there where like Steven Schneider from Employees Only would just drop into the studio like almost every week. So yeah, I mean, maybe not 3,000, but definitely 2,000 somewhere around there. So yeah,
I mean, there were episodes where we had a lot. Remember the whole Tiki Mafia arc? There was I think 13 of us in the studio.
Yeah, Cat Pack.
Yeah, the Cat Pack.
Yeah, all kinds of shenanigans happening. So yeah, I mean,
it highlights the the longevity of persistence. We're persistent. We keep at it, and we keep bringing it when we can bring it.
Yeah.
We've been nominated for the Tales of the Cocktail Award every year that it's been a category. Still haven't won.
Yep. The Susan Lucci of podcasting. That's us, guys.
That's good to bring that up. Nominations are up right now. So if anyone out there wants to throw a nomination our way, that'd be great. We'll see if we can get in the mix again. Eventually we got to win, I would think. They're going to run out of
I just want to get it over with at this point. I know you say it's nice to be nominated every year, but I'm just like, I'm too old for this shit. But
well, next week, our guest next week is a live bear that we're all going to fight. And that usually, if, Leo DiCaprio taught us anything, that's how you finally cross over that finish line. So stay tuned for 501, maybe our last episode. Who knows?
I'm hopeful that it's Cocaine Bear that we're going to fight.
Oh my God. Yeah, I saw the ads for that. I'm like, wow, this is a real movie that real human beings drew a real salary to create. And it's based on a true story. I'm like, how could you resist?
That's the rub. The true story aspect of it kills. I don't know. There's 2 movies out with bears in them right now. There's also the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movie. Have you seen this?
What?
So Winnie the Pooh is now old enough to be public domain, and of course, right away, someone took it and someone made a horror movie. It appears that Christopher Robin has left the 100-acre wood for long enough to have the gang go feral. And he returns to bring some friends with him to see the 100-acre wood, and they are all, I guess, murdered by Winnie the Pooh.
This show just keeps getting better. We're going into movie reviews. And, what else is happening in the world?
I want to see it though. Well, listen, there's some officials out in in Oregon, the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. I guess they had to add and cannabis now.
There you go.
And some of their top level managers and the longtime executive director have been caught setting aside for their own use some of the most sought after bourbons and other whiskeys, diverting them from the public and well, basically breaking ethics laws. And I was just curious what you got. We talked about it a little bit off air, just briefly. But I was curious, like at first blush, when you read the headline, it sounds like, yeah, that's shitty of them. But then at second blush, you're like, well, what about other people who have jobs? Like, I don't know, if you work for an airline in some capacity and you get better seats, or if you, I don't know, work for Madison Square Gardens and you get to get tickets to see the shows that are impossible to get. Like, do you consider this unethical, or do you consider this just a perk of the job, but it happens to be kind of a high profile perk?
I'm kind of two minds about it. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty cushy position already, so I don't necessarily want to be like, oh yes, these poor souls laboring they have to try all of this whiskey and like make regulations about like what people can and can't. I don't know. It doesn't. I've never had this person's job, but at first blush, it doesn't look that hard. That being said, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, I kind of feel like this is one of these things where it's just, if you're setting aside a whole case or like the entire allocation for the state of Oregon for yourself and your buddies, obviously.
Sure, that's one thing.
Yeah, there's a special place in hell for you. But if it's just a bottle or two, yeah, it seems like a whole lot of nothing to me.
Yeah, I mean, but the timing is interesting too. Speaking of movie reviews, there was actually the show Heist that just came out with a new season, and there's always a 2-part series, and one of them is on Pappygate. So that just came out recently, and so it's
so it's in the public format right now.
Yeah, so it's like you think about like, and let's just be honest, that's what we're talking about here is Pappy Van Winkle, right? But like to me,
they do mention Pappy specifically, but they mention some other allocated whiskeys and bottles as well. I think I'm with Greg.
I don't know, man. I think people need to like kind of chill out on the Pappy Van Winkle thing. It's like it's good, but like if you're like committing crimes over, it's like come on, there's other good whiskeys out there.
We all agree on that. I think I'm sort of maybe in line with Greg if what I understood you to say is correct. Like my example was if you work at Madison Square Gardens, you get tickets, but you don't get all of the seats, right? So if they're hoarding all of it, that's one thing. If they're hoarding a couple bottles for themselves, I guess that's another. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out in Oregon. I don't know. Does this mean now that they have the Cannabis Commission attached to that, does this mean they're also hoarding the best weed? Is there such a thing? Is there a Pappy of weed out there? I don't know.
I mean,
that'll be next on our first episode of our spinoff series, The Smokeasy, also coming next week after we fight the bear.
Yeah.
Well, so you've been out of town, correct?
Yeah, speaking of cannabis, I've been in Denver.
Yeah.
Mile High City, baby.
Well, they are mile high. They're higher than Jamaica Air over there. Yeah, we've been doing a great, what we're calling the Good Neighbors Tour, the first leg of the Good Neighbors Tour. Amore Margot has been just down the street from Death & Company since Amore opened 12 years ago. We'll be 12 years old also, Damon, in March.
Wow.
March 21st, 2011 was the crack open date of Amore Margot. So, man, yeah, it's like it all converges. But we've been neighbors with Death & Company the entire time, good friends, and they've opened up, of course, in both Denver and in LA. And in both of those shops, they have a little sidebar for kind of overflow or catch or whatever. And I have always dreamed of taking those bars over, and being their neighbor there. So that's what they finally allowed me to do. So 2 weeks, we got one more week to go. Starting tonight, it's Wednesday through Sunday. My head bartender Bruce is out there for this week. I was out there for the first week, and we're doing Amore Margot next door to. It's kind of inside of, but we're saying next door to Death & Co. in Denver, and then we'll come back here for a couple of weeks and do it again in LA. And overwhelming, we got a bunch of sponsors to help us out, help us pay for this endeavor, and our overwhelmingly largest one is Jägermeister, which you guys know I've been a longtime fan of. And in fact, I kind of strangely credit Amore Margot's initial success to Jägermeister. We set up that bar and it was full of bottles that no one had ever seen or weren't familiar with. And we always kept a Jägermeister cocktail on the menu in the beginning. And we always kept a bottle of Jägermeister at the top shelf center with a light actually beaming on it. So when people came in, they would at least spot a bottle or a menu item that they had some familiarity with. And I always say it was polarizing, whether they like Jägermeister or not. at least they had a foothold, and then we could start a conversation and work a drink into their hands. And so I'm really proud and excited that I'm really proud and excited to say that they've been really instrumental in making this thing happen. And if they hadn't come through, I don't know that we'd be out there yet. So really excited to have Jägermeister. And, we're going to hopefully have maybe Willie Shine come and be on the show and talk about everything that the Most family has done for the category.
Yeah, I was going to say, Willie Shine's done a great job with that brand.
Yeah, he's a great guy in general, a longtime friend of ours. Yeah, a longtime friend of ours, a great character in the field. He's now teaching up at Bar 5 Day. Like, this is a guy who's got some history, and he's been working for Jaeger for a few years now. And I don't know, it's great stuff, and I'm glad to see that it's getting, the very first cocktail of Jägermeister's on the very first menu at Amore Amargo was called the Redemption, and that was us trying to redeem Jaeger to the cocktail pantheon instead of just relegating.
Yeah, and Willie's done a great job of that too. I had him on the show many years ago, and after the show is always kind of like my favorite. That's when we're warmed up, and then we go get a beer. So we went to Rockarola in Williamsburg, and we're having a beer and a Jaeger.
Yeah, nice.
And we were talking shop, and I was like, this is when I was the global brand ambassador for Brooklyn Gin, and I asked him, what should I do to become a better brand ambassador? And he said, well, you work in gin. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, but everyone knows you as the Fernet guy. So he was like, you work in botanical spirits. He's like, so don't think of yourself, don't become a master of gin, become a master of botanicals. And that really blew my mind. And that's like some of the coolest advice I've ever gotten from anyone, like straight from Willie Shine, So really amazing person. So I'm glad you got to do that. Anyway, let's get into the show. Episode 500.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Speaking of legends in the industry, we've got one in the studio today, and we're going to talk about also, I hope we can talk about Mr. Cooper a little bit too. But before we get into that, let's welcome Chad Solomon to the Speakeasy, episode 500. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, buddy.
Wow. Welcome, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's incredible to be here. And I just listened to Lisa Laird's episode with you guys, and I was like, wait a second, am I going to get to do episode 500? So congrats to you guys for what an incredible run. And
thanks so much.
Incredible content that you produced over the years.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for taking the time out to be with us.
Thrilled to get to have this conversation.
Yeah. Chad, where are you right now?
So I am in the Cooper Spirits office in the west side of Newport Beach, California.
Cool. So you and I are both cracking cans of whiskey bucks at 9 a.m. No problem with that. We're working, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
This is R&D, always R&D. I think all of us are in the virtual studios now. I'm having the can of the Slow and Low 84 proof Rock and Rye, which is delicious, and these things have been kicking around for quite some time. And I want to talk about that a little bit. It's kind of like, when did your can hit shelves?
The Slow and Low was born in New York City, and really is a product of the cocktail revival. It started in the late 90s, early aughts, and the rye whiskey revival. And Rob and Katie Cooper invited me and my partner, Christy Pope, on this journey, initially hiring us to consult on the creation of the brand. And that first conversation happened at Raoul's in Soho in August of 2008. And then keep in mind, Saint Germain, which Cooper Spirits, released in 2007, in April of 2007.
Changed the landscape. That was a sea change for the landscape of what was available for bartenders.
It was, but Rob being such a, forward-thinking guy, and, being a third generation, distiller, his grandfather and father in the business, really, saw this, the RTD thing way early on, and he had the idea to revive Rock and Rye, but do it as a modernized, or he wanted to modernize it as a rye whiskey old fashioned. And so Christy and I were invited aboard originally to help with the naming of it. And, we were like, well, okay, what do you want to do here? And he's like, I want to revive Rock and Rye and modernize it as a rye whiskey old fashioned. Okay, that makes sense. Pull out the Whorehound, add Angostura. And, it's like, well, what do you want this brand to be? And at the time, he's like, sex, drugs, and rock and rye. I was like, okay, you want a rock and roll brand. And that made a ton of sense to me. And Christy, we have, kind of big musical backgrounds. And, we came up with a ton of names. And when I, presented them to Rob, it was, we went through the list. And Sother, your question was like, with the can itself, well, Christy had thrown into the mix canned heat. And we were thinking about the old Bowery drunks, sitting there drinking Sterno, filtering it through a sock. Rob wanted a brand with some edge. And anyways, as we were going down the list, why and how and all these different things, could work, Rob was such a student of packaging. And if you look at his father and grandfather's company, Charles Jacquin AC there in Philly, they had done some really dynamic packaging over time, going back to Forbidden Fruit. And then they took that package and, his father created Chambord, and they used the orb for Chambord. So Rob had the canned idea in his mind for a long time. And so when we got to canned heat, he was like, we're going to do this in cans. And interestingly enough, the real work, the conversation started in 2008. We put out, which turned into me getting involved in a much more robust way in the creation of the brand and the formulation. But the original product came out in 2011 at Tails in a very raucous party. Yeah, Tails 2011.
I was there.
Saint.
Yep.
And I helped Rob produce that one. And
not safe for radio.
Yeah. Well,
I believe I was there.
The tape is missing, unfortunately.
It was about 1,000 degrees, and there was big tubs full of ice and canned slow and low. And I remember I had to dunk my head into one of those tubs because it was so freaking hot. It
was a pressure cooker.
Shirt was off for sure.
Yes.
There was a lot going on that night.
There was a lot going on. Ann Tunerman was super excited about it. It was a very sanctioned event.
Yes.
No, so the cans actually did not come out. The real work didn't start until 2012, and Rob went to originally, basically got turned down everywhere he went, trying to find somebody who would do it. And the original plan was actually to do it in a 200 ml can. Rob's idea was, and keep in mind, when Slow and Low first hit the market, it had a 6-year age statement at 98 proof.
Yeah.
So, it was very tough finding somebody to take on the manufacturing of it. And ultimately it took 4 years. So from 2012 to 2016 was the real work. And so the cans came out and hit the market for the first time, the 100 ml can for the first time in August of 2016. And, we were first to market, and it was interesting because this was similar to a green tea can that he had found overseas. And, Japan has some of the most dynamic packaging, different can sizes, but, the minimum, the MOQ, the minimum order quantity is always a fun hurdle to take on.
I mean, but I want to talk about just briefly that coming out in 2012, you're really at the tip of the spear of the RTD kind of thing, right?
I think so. I mean, if you dial back, Rob saw, and really part of his genius was, he was such a friend to the bartending community. Him and Simon Ford in the early days were really the only brand guys that, it took a while for the bigger companies to really embrace, what was happening behind the bar in any meaningful way. And Rob and Katie were very early on in that, and they were, our age. Rob is only like 6 months older than me. We, got on very, very well, and Rob saw the potential in, an old fashioned lends itself to shelf stability in ways that a lot of other cocktails don't. And 2012.
Man,
I mean, I feel very fortunate that Amore Amargo, during the pandemic when we were doing to-go cocktails, we were able to bottle, because again, everything we do is somewhat shelf-stable. We're just mixing a bunch of shelf-stable things together to create a bigger shelf-stable thing. So yeah, the old-fashioned, I think, should always have been kind of the first ready-to-drink cocktail.
Well, what's interesting is if you look back, Hugh Blind was doing ready-to-drink cocktails in the late 1800s. This isn't a new phenomenon. What's really interesting is the ebb and flow over the years. In the 60s, Jim Beam had an old fashioned in a can. From what I can tell, it looks like it was at 30% ABV.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the first Jacquins. I've got, a formula book from Jacquins in the 40s, and they had a bottled old fashioned back when. So it isn't a new idea. What's really interesting is just how, the trends and qualities, ebb and flow. Rye whiskey was, on life support up until, the mid-aughts, and having, participated when, Audrey Saunders and Dave Wondrich got Rittenhouse back in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the opening team there at Pegu Club, and we opened at the end of August of 2005. We received the first Rittenhouse in October, and Audrey had put Dave Wondrich's, Dale DeGroff's Whiskey Smash on the menu.
Mm-hmm.
But Makers is the way Dale had made it. And we immediately switched out Makers for Rittenhouse. Audrey had committed to a pallet with Southern wine and spirits, and we sold through that in record time, for a $12.75 bottle of rye whiskey.
Yeah,
Rob saw that, and it's like overnight that became that Rittenhouse was on every important back bar, in New York, and just kind of like a rocket ship.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Like about Rob, he's just like a real true visionary. He like really knew how to read the room and kind of almost in ways predict the future, or just build out the future, with the rock and rye, with Slow and Low, with obviously with Saint Germain, good God, like what a behemoth that is, but even with like Lock, Stock and Barrel, like he was always ahead of the game, and that's to your point, he really tapped into what was happening at the bars. Cause God, and as you put it, like so much earlier than any of the other bigger brands, like he really like blazed a lot of trails, in his career and time.
Mm-hmm.
He absolutely, he was a very curious guy, and he was brought into the business by his father, 5-6 years old. Norton went by the name Sky. Sky would bring, Rob and his brother John, along, got them involved in the business. And Rob just was that unique guy who was curious, was interested in the family history, the history of Jacquins, and knew where the levers were in the business. And then, read the room right and said, okay, here are the lanes, going into the future in a way that was really incredible. And it was, it was amazing getting to work with him and, learn from him.
And drive the van.
Yes.
The sweetest van.
Well, here's what's really cool about the van. I got shout out to Katie Cooper. So Katie grew up in Laguna Beach, and when Rob and Katie sold Saint Germain, they moved to the office. Used to be at 30th Street and 5th Avenue in Manhattan, and so they essentially moved shop to the West Coast, at least from the marketing offices. And Katie's grandfather had a van conversion business that they did like super, pimped out vans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in Fullerton down here in Orange County. So, there's a family connection with all that. We have the 78 Chevy van that is quite the piece that we'd love to trot out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always been a cool thing about Cooper Spirits. It's like, you had the Citroën truck van, delivery van, the old French for the Saint Germain activations. I remember like spending a lot of time there at Tails. And then the next thing, I'm a big classic car guy, so like, I'm a huge appreciator. I just think that Rob always had like he had his finger on a lot of pulse. I guess he liked me too, because when Lock, Stock and Barrel came out, I think it was the Malt Advocate or one of those, the tasting,
the 13 year.
Yeah, it was one of those magazines. Anyway, he was like, "We got to get Damon to do the feature on this." So it's like the first article that was written about it. He was like, "Let's get Damon to like send him a couple of bottles and like do a review and maybe some cocktails and have him like, do a feature with this magazine." Tasting panel. It was tasting panel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. He and I just like we kind of had very similar tastes. So no wonder I like this stuff. Like. He's just cool guy.
Well, I was going to say, Rob was, he made great friends with. I think about coming kind of out of our generation, or how many people have had a ton of success and influence in the business, and Rob was a friend to all of us, and found these access points, and we got invited in. It's kind of incredible getting to like work with him and learn, and it created another lane of opportunity. The lock stock story though is really kind of incredible in that Rob, as early as as we started the Slow and Low conversations, or what became Slow and Low, he started he went to Heaven Hill and expecting to find, he had seen the 21 year and then the 23 year come out, and expecting that there's a rick house full of rye. And they're like, yeah, there's we don't have anything. It's like,
right.
we're doing production one day a year.
Yep.
And he was quite, crestfallen and surprised, by it. So he ended up getting to ADL in Alberta, or Calgary, Alberta, and finding this, giant cache of barrels that was essentially a bumper crop that was produced by somebody else that ended up not wanting it. And he secured, this crazy amount of lots that had been distilled between March and May of 1999. And, from the beginning, and so it was about 9-10 years old by the time when he made the purchase, and on the initial lots. And, I remember tasting it back then. And so the original Slow and Low was the 6-year age statement was made with that juice. But it was so ahead of the market at the time with the higher proof age statement, and it was over the head of the market. And so the Vatted was born out of that. And then Rob really saw the potential in all the conditions that make lock, stock, and barrel unique for longer aging, because it's much cooler climate there in Calgary, and then the barrel conditions and the barrels themselves all lent itself to to a potential longer run, and that was always the idea.
Right. Talk a little bit about like the choice. I mean, I know that it was classic to use the rock and rye, right? Rock candy syrup. Like, I don't even understand necessarily what rock candy syrup is. Do you make a rock candy first and then make that into syrup?
It's a great question. So rock candy is literally goes back at least 1,000 years to the Persians, right? It's this old thing. It's sucrose. It's crystallized sugar, right? Yeah. Exactly. And it's all about the crystallization, how you allow the crystallization to happen. It's a fancy name for, if you take rock candy syrup, it's no different than, it's cane sugar syrup. What's, interesting though, is if you dig down and you look at sugar processing in the 19th century, you didn't have the fluffy white sugar that we see today. It wasn't that clean. You would have got it by the loaf, and it wouldn't have been, it would have had a little bit more of a molasses content. The loaves, I think the example I always use is more akin to like a piloncillo that you see in like a Mexican grocery store.
Yes.
And so you would have had that, or you would have had these like more, robust kind of rocks, or bigger crystals of sugar. And then, obviously add water to it, cook it down or dissolve it. You get rock candy syrup.
Right. And it gives a great mouthfeel. Like I'm sipping on one now in my home studio. And I remember the first time I got a bottle of the stuff, I poured it just over this one just was in my fridge, but when I first got the bottle of stuff, I poured it over a big cube of ice, and I was like, man, this is just like so, again, so ready to drink. I think I cruised through half that bottle before I realized how far I'd gone with it, and I still had the same piece of ice in my glass.
Wow, Oh, I mean, that's the idea, So,
there's a lot of reasons you said wow, and I understand all of them.
No, when we first had the conversation about the formulation of it, we did all the prototypes at Milk and Honey in 2009. Christy and I were running our business Cuffs and Buttons out of the basement. We went in one afternoon and we had the old formulas, because if you look at the bottle of Slow and Low, so there's the Hochstadter's name, 1884. Well, so Mr. Hochstadter and Charles Jacquin started the company in New York City in 1884, and they built a very robust portfolio of products, but they came out the Rock and Rye in 1884. And I've looked at I've seen the old formula, and then Jacquin's has had a Rock and Rye available and still does robust business in Pennsylvania. And the thing is that rye became over time unaged. The sugar content became, increased. And, Rock and Rye's quality kind of really declined throughout the 20th century. So Rob was like, I want to get real aged rye whiskey back into the product. And, we both thought it was too sweet. And I was like, well, look, let's just do it. Let's just look at, let's weigh a bunch of sugar cubes, find an average. Let's look at a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, and kind of took the same approach that, we had behind the bar, and let's standardize this. And so Rob's one addition was wanting to use orange blossom honey, raw orange blossom honey, as a mouthfeel component. And it really does enhance the mouthfeel of the Rock and Rye. It's a higher quality sweetener. If you taste the honey on its own, it's got its own kind of gorgeous subtle floral qualities that are, I call them kind of, it's a subliminal element that enhances the Rock and Rye.
I mean, yeah, because it is quite, even sipping on it now, it's just quite silky. It's got a feeling that, it's very unique.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I need to. I've already gotten through my whiskey box, so this might be a good time to take a break so I can go grab another can.
Yeah.
So, but we're at that time of the show where we're gonna take a break, listen to some words from our sponsors, and continue talking about Slow and Low, and just all the cool. I don't know. I think it's the best RTD out there, and that's it. And as we said before, Rob Cooper was way ahead of the game, and as well as, Chad and Christy. So let's take a quick break and get back into it in just a few.
Yeah.
Cheers.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
And we are back. You are listening to the 500th episode of the Speakeasy here on Heritage Radio Network. Woo-hoo. Go us. And today we're talking with Chad Solomon of Slow and Low. Been talking about a lot of the products that you've been doing since 1884, it says on the can. So, close to 150 years of this, which is just wild. And I'm actually sipping on some of your newer stuff. I've got this Whiskey Sunshine here, which I actually haven't taken a sip of until right this moment. Which has got a really nice level of carbonation. The citrus is there, but it's not overpowering, and you can definitely tell that it's one of my beefs about a lot of RTDs is that you either lose the main ingredient, the star of the show, or you lose all the other stuff that's in there. But this is like nicely balanced, and I appreciate it. And I'd like to hear a little more about kind of moving away from what you've been doing for the past century and a half and breaking some new ground with this one and the whiskey buck that you also sent us.
Well, so, as I mentioned previously, Rob and Katie had hired us to consult on, the naming, and it turned into a more robust participation in the creation of the brand. But Christy and I always had our own business. We're doing other things. And in 2019, Katie Cooper reached out and had a conversation and kind of a level set, where the company was, where the brands were. And those were very productive conversations that led to Christy and I joining Cooper Spirits in a formal capacity for the first time we formally came on in, I think it was March of 2020. And, but with a mandate to really grow the brand and to continue on Rob's legacy of innovation. And, the first thing out of the gate, was the coffee old fashioned was kind of easier to accomplish in a faster or quicker manner. But in the back of, my mind was always the idea liquid sunshine. And when Rob and I had a ton of brainstorming sessions, about kind of creating the brand voice, the brand essence, all of that stuff early on, we brought a lot of, shared reference points into the conversation, that were, from totally wild to very classic. And George Bernard Shaw, the Irish poet, his quote, "Whiskey is liquid sunshine." Well, we took it, and our view was well, what would Ken Kesey or Timothy Leary or Aldous Huxley, we took a more psychedelic, kind of view. But if you look at with the citrus infusion into the rock and rye, it brings a new dimension or element to the idea of whiskey as liquid sunshine. Well, when Christy and I opened Midnight Rambler in Dallas, we had our cocktail bar in Dallas, Texas. I would do Slow and Low Sundays, and we had a happy hour, and one of the names that I come up with for Slow and Low was called Checkered Past. So we did like a beer and a shot. We called it a checkered past. So it'd be like a pony of high life and, a shot of Slow and Low rock and rye. And over time, outside of the old fashioned, it was like, well, rock and rye, if you look at a classic sour based cocktail in the, the milk and honey or the Pegu template, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon, 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup, 2 ounces of spirit. With Slow and Low rock and rye, it's every 2 ounces has the equivalent of a 1/4 ounce, of sugar syrup, right? Mm. So if you dial back and then just adjust that ratio to 3/4 of an ounce of lemon, 1/2 ounce of simple syrup, and 2 ounces of rock and rye, it's the same balance.
Right.
So that led to I wanted to embody, what a liquid sunshine. And so in my mind, it was always thinking from a musical standpoint, well, what's kind of like quadraphonic or psychedelic citrus? So I wanted more elements of citrus as opposed to just the lemon. So it was like orange, lemon, and grapefruit, with more dynamic bitters, at the time, and shake it out and kind of looking at a daisy template, like a whiskey, like a rock and rye margarita, but with more dynamic citrus. And so I made that, and people love that on Slow and Low Sundays. We do different DJ sets call it Slow and Low Sunday School, and deep dives into these, very esoteric musical pockets. So fast forward now, thinking of innovation ideas, it was like, all right, let's bring liquid sunshine to life in a can. And the trick is, bringing citrus into, we're talking about shelf stability earlier. Citrus is one of the most fragile and perishable ingredients to work with, and citrus oxidation is the enemy of most RTDs. And so that was like the nut to crack, in doing both sunshine and buck. That's the run up and, to I guess how these were born.
I was going to ask actually earlier, but you just answered it. There's so many spirits out there in the world that are essentially we were talking about just the history of spirits and kind of bottled cocktails and RTDs, like whenever, if you tell the Carthusian monks that you're mixing chartreuse with other things, they're like, what? Well, they don't speak,
right?
They're like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah, exactly. So but as far as, being innovative with it, it's like, you've got the rock and rye, and I was going to ask earlier if there was any kind of like using that as an ingredient in a cocktail, even though it already is a cocktail. So you just answered that. And I think that's what's really cool about it too. As you mentioned, like just kind of building out a sour from the rock and rye is a pretty easy thing to do, like you're using fresh lemon juice and you bumping up the like simple syrup or whatever, even other liqueurs, like Saint Germain, for instance, like you could like really build on top of it, because at the end of the day, like, or of the beginning of cocktails, really, the old fashioned is, the grandfather of all of them, and everything kind of started as a variation on the original cocktail. So it's kind of brilliant that you can actually like pop open one of these cans. And I, like, as a person, I think I'm the first person who ever just like opened up a whole bottle of Underberg and threw it in a shaker. Like if you can just crack open a can and pour the whole thing into a shaker or a mixing glass, there's something really badass about that,
Yeah.
And rock and roll.
Yeah.
And even on this can of the Whiskey Buck, it says "Kick Out the Jams." I'm a huge MC5 fan, so really appreciate that.
That's why I put it on there. Yeah. Joseph Schwartz. I don't know if you guys know the great Joseph Schwartz is one of the most important people in the Milk and Honey story. That Joseph, in particular, brought, in the very early days, Milk and Honey, Sasha and TJ, or when Sasha opened the bar, his childhood best friend TJ, they had the Savoy cocktail book. And TJ, I bring his name up, he created the Gold Rush that we all know. But then Toby Maloney brought in Charles Schumann's American Bar. And Joseph, though, brought in the W.C. Whitfield cocktail books, Just Cocktails and Here's How. And in that, there was the Gin Buck. And so very early on, we had obviously we made the Sasha's ginger syrup, the Moscow Mule, and, a Gin Buck, a Whiskey Buck, make these things. And that's, that was when was looking for a companion to Whiskey Sunshine. There's a lot of obvious drinks we could do, but that's where the Buck came. And in the W.C. Whitfield book, there's an illustration, of a horse kicking. And, the English, the Gin Buck, gin and ginger beer, is, adding a kick to your ginger beer with gin. So it's just like taking it to a further step. Let's get Wayne Kramer and crew, in on it and kick out the jams.
Motherfuckers.
Exactly. Exclamation.
Oh man, it's so cool. Well, I mean, like, also just building off of those like classic cocktails, like the slow, like rock and rye, old fashioned. You also have this coffee version, which is really interesting. Can you talk to us about that one?
Yeah, with Intelligentsia, right? They're a big known coffee brand.
They are. Intelligentsia, those guys are just first class. Pioneers in the specialty coffee space since I think 1995, and they're very thoughtful about every step in the coffee chain. They really honor the agriculture. They thoughtfully source, roast and then extract. To highlight the fruit, at its best potential from wherever it comes from in the world. Years ago, Christy and I and Audrey Saunders had a brief project, partnered and opened a bar in Los Angeles in 2009 called the Tar Pit. And while we were doing that, ended up getting to do an event in Silver Lake with Tomas Estes and Tequila Ocho, and at the time, the director of education for Intelligentsia. And that was my first exposure to them. We did a proper, cupping, and I was just really impressed. So fast forward, when we were looking, to new extensions in the Slow and Low universe, there was a consensus at Cooper Spirits about coffee. And so the idea was to approach intelligentsia and do a coffee old fashioned based on my idea was to looking at Cafe Brûlot. It's the greatest coffee cocktail,
Right.
And so taking Cafe Brûlot as a starter, it's got all the elements. Obviously, it's a brandy drink, which is amazing. But can we do a cold serve? It's on an elemental level, same way that Rock and Rye is on an elemental level, an old fashioned. Let's look at the same elements at Brûlot. So, but I wanted to modernize it. I didn't want the overly heavy roasted coffee. I wanted something that kind of spoke, to the tip of the spear where coffee is now. And so Intelligentsia was game, and it was really, really exciting working with their director, of innovation, Bailey, and tasting through their coffees and looking for something that was going to be optimized in a cold format serve. And that was the challenge. And then obviously figuring out, the balance and formulation. So this one took about 62 iterations, but I'm really, really pleased the way it came out. And same with the Rock and Rye. It's obviously meant to be a pour over old fashioned. Its optimum serve is pour over ice. But, it's like if you want to anchor an espresso martini or make all the other, you want to go Lebowski and make a Caucasian, it's there for you.
Yeah. I hadn't even really considered the option of using it as an ingredient. I just like to drink it as it stands. I noticed also on the cans and in all of your media and things like that, you're pretty proud to mention Union Made, and then there's even mention of Scobyville on here. I'm a fan of the unions. I think they, we lost our way in this country with unions, and I feel like we're finally kind of coming back to that. Talk a little bit about the fact that you're union made and proud to be so.
Well, so Rob's family, has Jacques Renaissy in Philadelphia in the Kensington neighborhood in South Philly, and that's a union crew, and Rob saw a nobility in that. And a nobility in labor and putting in hard work and doing things with integrity, and wanted to put that out front. And so that was baked into the brand, up front, and there was just a pride in that. Now we produce at Laird & Co. in Scobyville, New Jersey, right outside Asbury Park at the historic DSP #1, Laird & Co.
Yeah, Lisa Laird was just on the show, so that's amazing.
Yeah, I saw that, and what a great interview. Lisa's great, and we are longtime fans and collaborators, and continue to try to tell that story. What an incredible history with that family and Apple Brandy and Applejack in America. But there's a union crew there at Scobyville at their production facility. And I think that like this, Rob was always big on, inspired by, 19th century tradition, crafted with integrity, and the labor component was something that, he wanted to celebrate. And we still celebrate.
I mean, that's incredible. And I think that's, in general for America, I think the way forward for the worker to get what they're owed and deserve, unions are going to need to come back pretty strong. So I'm happy to hear that and see that. That's pretty great. Always looking backwards with respect, but you're always looking forward as well, right? So you've got these two releases that we've just talked about and tasted a bit of here on the show. And you just sort of dropped in our ear that you got a limited release possibly coming out. We want to talk about that a little bit?
We do. So, there's in the Slow and Low universe, previously, there was an 8-year-old, 8-year age statement, 100 proof version of Rock and Rye released, and then a 6-year version. And so I went back in, and we've got a 6-year-old 100 proof release, but I slightly changed up the formulation. So I dropped the honey, brought in Demerara sugar, and increased the amount of bitters. And so this is now shipping, and we'll do one more release later this year. It's really, really excellent. Got to get you guys a sample.
Yeah, I'd love to taste it and see it. It's just cool to know that you're, again, always sort of being respectful to the past, but continually innovating and trying to move forward with new products and interesting things for your consumers and for us to taste and share with people.
Yeah, one of the other things that the Lock, Stock, and Barrel got some exciting things that will continue to. I don't have any news other than the fact that there's a brand new blend on the Vatted out now. That is a blend of straight rye, 7 to 15 years old. There's a 7-year, a 10-year, a 12, and a 15-year. Blended in there, so grab it while you can. These are limited releases. There will be another limited drop later this year, but that's something that will continue to grow. That's
very cool.
Continually looking to there'll be future innovations in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, people who like whiskey and like to experience sort of the growth of a brand, like that's a great. I think that's a great thing to do. Drop out releases, and it's like I don't know, like Supreme. Like everyone's gonna line up to grab it because they want to get theirs and drink it and enjoy it. I drink it and enjoy it. I know a lot of people collect them, but so yeah, pretty excited about those things as well.
Good luck finding it in Oregon, but
You just got to have some friends up there. That's the problem. You just got to know the right people.
Exactly.
It's a perk. It's just a perk.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, man. It's good catching up with you, Chad. But you're a total legend in this industry. I remember first hearing about you from Linnell when I was working at Linnell's in Brooklyn, and I got to meet you and Christy shortly after that. So I've been kind of following your work along with the work of Slow and Low and Ashsteiners and obviously all the Cooper Spirits, but it's really cool to hear. And what a fun guest to have on for our 500th episode.
Yeah, for sure, man. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, guys, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. And, really great catching up, with all of you.
Yeah, it was great to have you. And before we go, I just want to say also a quick thank you to everybody that's listening, everybody that's stuck with us for 500 episodes. I can't imagine another human being sticking with me for something that I do 500 times. So I really appreciate the fact that everyone, keeps tuning in, keeps writing those reviews, keeps writing to us, keeps just enjoying it and spreading the word. And we really appreciate that you've been with us and shared some laughs and helped us grow. And here's to 500 more, y'all.
Yeah. Indeed.
I'm at the end of this whiskey sunshine. That's why I'm feeling sappy at the end of the show.
We've been on the air for over 12 years, 500 episodes. We're in over 70 countries, and there's one listener in Zambia. So thank you for the one listener in Zambia.
We do it for you. It's just for you.
Some great rock and roll coming out of there too. But yeah, again, thanks again for Chad Solomon for being on the show, 500th episode. Thank you to Heritage Radio Network. We should definitely thank Heritage Radio and all the great people who've worked with us over the years. Thank you to Armin, who's working with us today. And God, let's 500 more. Let's keep going, guys.
Let's do it.
All right. Until then, until next week, all I can say is cheers.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks for watching the odometer flip.
Cheers now.
Indeed.
So you don't shun the devil with your
The Speakeasy is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food and drink radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
It's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. and realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next farm bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.